Recently, a plane was discovered in the Amazon jungle that had crashed. Unfortunately, following this tragic event, only 4 children who were on board survived. But the story is not only tragic, it is equally mysterious. The oldest of the children was only 13 years old, and the youngest was merely 11 months. To give you an idea, the search for them lasted about 40 days. How exactly 4 children of such young ages managed to survive alone in the Amazon jungle for 40 days remains an extraordinary mystery. The plane, which was flying over the Amazon forests, suddenly disappeared from all radar screens and, unfortunately, never appeared again. On board were 4 children and 3 adults, their mother, the pilot, and a third companion. After some time, it became clear that the plane had indeed crashed somewhere in the Amazon jungle. Naturally, a rescue team was dispatched to search for them, but these were not ordinary rescuers. To help you understand what the Amazon jungle is like, consider this. This is just one of the types of snakes that live there. And believe me, a bite from one of these snakes will not be pleasant at all. Even the rescue team would have no chance to intervene in time. And this is only one out of 80 types of snakes that inhabit the area, not to mention the other wild animals and creatures that live there. Over 100 military personnel took part in the search for the children, not ordinary civilians. To give you an idea of the scale, even a military dog disappeared during the search, and it has still not been found. Around 40 days passed from the beginning of the search. At this point, the rescuers started to realize that it was unlikely they would find anyone alive. Even if someone was found, it seemed almost impossible that they could survive the threats of the jungle, including poisonous snakes, spiders, jaguars, and the harsh natural environment. Most importantly, there was no food. Finally, their efforts were not in vain. They discovered the plane, but what they saw shocked them. All 3 adults on board were dead: the mother of the children, the pilot, and the third companion. However, all 4 children were alive and present on board when the rescuers arrived. Not a single scratch or injury could be found on any of them. They looked as though they had just walked out of their home yesterday. This may seem normal at first glance, but let me remind you of the specific facts. The youngest child was not yet 1 year old, the second was 4, the third 9, and the oldest was only 13. Does it not seem strange that 4 children of these ages survived for 40 days alone in the jungle? And I am not even mentioning the venomous snakes, spiders, and big cats that inhabited the area. On top of all this, they survived without any substantial food for 40 days. Reading the comments on videos about this story, I was shocked by the wide range of theories proposed by viewers. Consider these facts carefully. When it was over, one of the children's grandmothers was asked how it was possible that they survived for 40 days. She explained that the oldest child was exceptionally well adapted to the world. But here comes a critical detail. One of the rescuers reported finding size 42 shoe prints at the crash site. This implies that another adult may have been present with them immediately after the crash. Of course, when asked, the children insisted that only they survived the disaster. But doesn't it seem strange that the plane only had 1 pilot on board and no flight attendant? Think about it. Here's a hint. Consider once more what these children could have eaten during those 40 days. Whatever truly happened during the crash remains locked in the children's memories, and it is unlikely we will ever know the full truth. The most ironic detail is that the search continues today, but now it focuses on locating the missing dog. And somehow, I feel that the dog is not nearly as well trained as the children. This photograph is called The Agony of Amara Sanchez. It was taken on November 16, 1985. It captures a 13-year-old girl who had been submerged in icy water for 3 days. Looking at her, you feel not just sorrow, but also fear, transmitted through her cold, piercing gaze. Those familiar with the story cannot believe it, and are struck by the courage and strength of this young girl, who endured such circumstances without losing hope until her final moments. Some esoteric observers even believe that the photo captures more than just a 13-year-old girl. Looking into her eyes, you can read anger directed at the inaction of those around her. It seems as though she already understood what would happen next, and that in the future, her story would become just another video. It all began in 1985 in Colombia, in the city of Armero. At that time, a massive eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano occurred, which was partly responsible for this tragedy, although not the only factor. When the lava reached a glacier, it caused rapid melting, combining with volcanic ash to create torrents of water that rushed down the slopes. You might think, it's just water, what's the danger? But there are two critical points. First, the water was extremely cold due to coming from a glacier. Second, it was already autumn. All these torrents moved at an incredible speed, 6 meters per second. Most importantly, this all occurred at night, when residents were peacefully asleep in their beds. 13-year-old Almara Sanchez was among them. She was sleeping in her home when the torrent swept away everything she could call her home within mere seconds. Almara ended up trapped under the debris of her own house. Rescuers could not locate her for a long time and presumed her dead. Eventually, they lifted the rubble and reached her, but the sight was grim. She was submerged in icy water up to her neck, and extracting her was almost impossible because her legs were pinned under debris so heavily that they would have needed to drain the entire pit to free her. The most striking part, this photo was taken after 3 days of her being in water. It was captured by photographer Frank Fawn, who spent an entire day reaching her location. He took this photograph to convey the full horror of the scene. Interestingly, when this photo was released to the public, many called him a vulture, accusing him of profiting from the suffering of others. He responded that it was the only and most obvious way to show people the truth. As you understand, the only way to save her was with pumps that the authorities should have delivered on time. Without the pumps, it was impossible to drain the water because it continued to accumulate. Over all 3 days, no pump was provided. Local residents helped by scooping water with pots and even brought her food, attempting to distract her from the obvious problem. Although after 3 days in freezing water, distraction seemed nearly impossible. At some point, Almara began hallucinating. She mentioned being afraid of being late for school and told those around her to go rest. About 60 hours in, Almara could endure no more. Presumably due to severe gangrene in her leg and hypothermia, she could no longer survive. Strikingly, she passed with a calm expression, shedding no tears, fully aware in her final moments of the outcome. The most horrifying fact is that 2 hours before her death, the authorities delivered a pump, but it was broken. In other words, she could have survived if not for the negligence of local officials. The Colombian Minister of Defense responded that Colombia is an underdeveloped country. Society, of course, seeks someone to blame. Many speculate that Amara's gaze is directed at the inaction of the government. Fantasy enthusiasts believe there is something sinister and frightening in her eyes, that her soul may remain unrested until those responsible suffer as she did. Honestly, the photo is genuinely frightening. Her eyes convey something deeply unsettling. Of course, there were many victims in this tragedy, and the lives of others are just as important as Amara's. This situation demonstrates how powerless humans are in the face of nature. The reaction to the photographer, who showed the truth, is incomprehensible. Have you ever been asked by your parents to go to the basement for a jar of pickles, and you find excuses like "I'm too lazy," but really, it's because the lights aren't on, You were right not to go. 4 years ago, a woman named Diana Furs moved into a new house with her family. She was thrilled to leave her old cramped apartment behind and start a new life. She kept her same job, which required long commutes, often making her late. Her relationship with her husband was somewhat strained, and lately, he had been largely absent. What happened next, however, forced him to pay attention. On her day off, Diana stayed home to clean thoroughly. The children went to play, and her husband, as usual, wandered elsewhere. Diana cleaned the house, and then decided to tackle the basement. Upon entering, she realized it would take a long time, because the place was filled with clutter, as if no one had ever cleaned it. Initially, she planned to throw it all away, but decided to explore. She found an old bottle, which appeared to be fine vintage wine. She left it for later and continued cleaning. When her husband returned, they decided to open the bottle, only to discover it was not wine. On one hand, they were disappointed, and on the other, terrified, as the object resembled some kind of cursed bundle with spells. Diana researched it online to see if it had value. Suddenly, the children ran in, distracting them from the object. This distraction proved costly, as days later, a new incident occurred. One evening, Diana returned from work late and stopped to pick up the children from friends nearby. This delay ironically saved her from a worse fate.
My bedroom light is on, which is strange because I don't remember leaving it on. Listen, I'm gonna walk inside real fast. I want you to wait out here for me. I want you. Oh my god. Somebody broke into our.
She immediately called her husband and realized someone was in the house. When he arrived, the intruder had fled. The couple entered their home, shocked to find nothing disturbed. Everything was in its original place. Diana remembered the mysterious bundle and began feeling paranoid, connecting the events and suspecting it attracted evil forces. Fortunately, her husband calmed her, suggesting they install a security system. But before they could, another incident occurred, slightly worse. Diana was cooking in the kitchen when she heard a door opening from the back. She wisely exited through the front, running out into the street. She immediately starts calling her husband, although, probably, she should have called the police. Luckily, her husband was nearby and arrived within a few minutes. But this time it all ended a little differently.
Yep.
When he called the police officers and they arrived at the scene, he told them about the strange thing they had found in the house, after which all of this began to happen. And here is where the most interesting part happens. Naturally, the police asked to be shown that very bundle, to make sure they weren't crazy. And when they went inside the house, they once again saw that absolutely nothing had been touched, except for one thing. In the box where that bundle had been, there was only an empty bottle left. And this is when it finally dawned on them that they should probably find out a little more about this object. They started Googling and realized how valuable it was to collectors of such things. Strange how it even ended up in their basement in the first place. But, accordingly, the fact that someone broke in to steal it was not strange at all. So the most ironic thing is that this scroll was indeed attracting evil forces, but not some kind of spirits, just the plain force of thieves. Diana and her husband decided not to file a police report because they thought they didn't need this scroll. And, in fact, they were lucky that the police believed them at their word and didn't fine them for a false call.